Subsequent to the unsettling developments throughout our neighborhood, the property management released a home safety manual via the community chat. Regardless of any peculiar noises you hear post 10 p.m., refrain from peering through the peephole. The cold medicine provided by us is white. Should you come across any red variants, ensure they are flushed down the drain immediately. Under no circumstances should you open your door to any neighbors. The message was puzzling upon receipt. It had been dispatched by Manager Lee, the administrator of our community's property management. Manager Lee's profile picture had inexplicably changed to a solitary eye. This eye nearly dominated the entire frame, casting a disquieting aura. Quickly, residents in the homeowners group started to express their doubts. However, they were swiftly muted. Food packages will be distributed by our staff. Should you discover unidentified meat within, refrain from consuming it. Monitor the psychological well-being of your family during this period indoors. Should any member exhibit unusual behaviors like walking upside down or relentless laughter, contact our staff immediately at 88XXXXXX. After 10 p.m., irrespective of any peculiar sounds, refrain from peering through the door's peephole. Our issued cold medicine is white. Encounter any red variants, and you must flush them down the drain without delay. Our staff will knock 3 times. Should a 4th knock occur, it's imperative that you do not open the door. Refrain from answering the living room's landline. Our distributed N95 masks are white. Immediately discard any red masks you encounter. There are 43 channels available on the television. If you spot a family member tuned into a 44th channel, swiftly unplug the TV. If it continues to operate, destroy it completely. Regularly count your family members and remain vigilant. If the numbers don't match, loudly exclaim, prosperity, democracy, civility, harmony, and promptly jump out of the nearest window. If you see a family member wearing red clothing you've never seen before, immediately hide in your room. In case a family member experiences difficulty breathing, isolate them in a room, lock it, and deny entry to anyone. These home safety guidelines were unnervingly strange. At that instant, rapid knocking came from the door. I glanced through the peephole to see my neighbor, Sister Wong. Feeling my presence, she leaned close, her eye almost engulfing the peephole as she pleaded, "Xiaoya, have you got any spare cold medicine? Brother Wong has somehow come down with a fever. Just 1 pill would help." Cough, cough. Sister Wong's voice was coarse, broken by violent coughs. "Do not open the door for any neighbors." Confused by this directive yet certain we had no cold medicine left, I replied automatically, "Sister Wong, I'm sorry, but we've run out of cold medicine," I said instinctively. Peering through the peephole, Sister Wong's eyes suddenly widened alarmingly. The bloodshot veins in her eyes were starkly visible. "All right, I'll seek help elsewhere. His fever has persisted for days and has worsened considerably," she uttered intermittently. She moved away with a hunched back and rigid steps, her condition seemingly alarming. Right then, my mother's voice intervened. "Wait, don't go. We do have cold medicine. I bought some this afternoon. My daughter isn't aware of it." Sister Wong stopped abruptly. Her head turned back slowly, and I could distinctly make out her smile beginning to form. "Mom, we mustn't open the door," I whispered urgently, fear coloring my voice. My mother looked at me quizzically. She wasn't a member of the homeowners group and hadn't seen the rules. "Sister Wong has been generous to us, bringing vegetables from her garden last time she visited her hometown. It's just a packet of cold medicine. Have you become so ungenerous? In times like these, it's crucial to support each other," my mother murmured softly. I held her hand tightly, preventing her from opening the door. Abruptly, the door produced a loud bang. Through the peephole, Sister Wong's blank gaze met mine as she continued to thud her head against the door. Blood began to streak her forehead. Seemingly impervious to pain, she droned on mechanically, "Open the door. Give me the medicine." This unusual behavior alarmed even my mother. "Xiaotong, do you think Sister Wong has gone insane?" she whispered. Just then, I heard our neighbor's door swing open. What's all this racket? It's late. Can't we have some quiet? Said the young man who had recently settled next door. Sister Wang halted her assault on our door, her eyes slowly creeping towards the source of the disturbance. Moments later, she disappeared from view. Hey, what are you doing? The young man's voice trailed off. Suddenly, a chilling scream pierced the night from his apartment. My mother's grip tightened around my hand, her anxiety palpable. I shared her dread. A deathly quiet ensued. The peephole revealed nothing of the events next door. Minutes later, Sister Wang's form ominously re-entered our peephole's frame. She seemed to be pulling something behind her. It was a person, sporting strikingly dyed yellow hair. The young man from next door. I clutched my mouth, my heart hammering as I fixated on the hallway. Zzzt, zzzt. The noise was from fabric grating against the floor. A long trail of blood marked the floor. As she passed, Sister Wang paused once more, apparently noticing something. She slowly, mechanically turned her head in my direction. I ducked down quickly, a cold sweat breaking out across my back. The sound of her footsteps gradually faded. Sister Wang had moved on. Fear painted my mother's face. Xiaotong, what is happening with Sister Wang? I didn't directly respond. Instead, I showed her the guidelines posted in the homeowners group. Strange and unnatural events were quietly unfolding around us. Abruptly, my mom seized my hand, her hand shaking slightly. Listen, what is that sound? I shuddered. I could hear it too. A very subtle chewing noise drifted from the hallway. It was as though someone was nibbling on something. I swallowed, a ghastly thought dawning on me. No, surely not. Could Sister Wang actually be feasting on someone? The heavy thudding of footsteps resumed abruptly. A thunderous bang reverberated as the door was violently struck. Sister Wang's form appeared outside the peephole. She seemed to be wielding something, relentlessly battering it against the door. Xiaotong, I can see you. I won't take the medicine without offering something in return. See, I brought something to exchange. Her lips twisted grotesquely upwards, stained with clumps of flesh and dark red residue. My complexion drained of color. The object Sister Wang referred to as an exchange item was the head of the young man from next door, which she held in her grasp. His head had been gruesomely torn away, his expression eternally fixed in a moment of terror. In terror, my mom hurriedly phoned the police. Xiaotong, the police are on their way. Don't be scared, she said. Her face was ghostly pale, yet she continually spoke soothing words to me. The pounding on our door became even fiercer. Suddenly, the voice of Brother Wang next door echoed. Wife, did you get the medicine? What's all the racket outside? It's so loud. Sister Wang's head jerked towards the direction of the voice, emitting a sharp crack. Medicine. Got it, hee. I'll bring it to you now. Speaking in broken phrases, Sister Wang's steps eventually faded as she moved toward the adjacent apartment. I exhaled deeply, though my worry for Brother Wang quickly resurfaced. Suddenly, my mom's phone rang. She conversed briefly, her expression shifting to disbelief. How could that be, officer? Surely there's a mistake. In her fluster, she accidentally switched on the speakerphone. I heard the police officer on the other end, noticeably upset. Ma'am, please don't jest with us. We're already at your residence, and when we inquired about your situation, all you did was stand there, smiling at us. Your smile was unnervingly eerie. Let's ensure this doesn't recur. The call was abruptly ended. My mom and I exchanged worried glances, seeing the fear in each other's eyes. I realized then that we might no longer be tethered to the real world. It seemed our whole community had been severed from reality. Then, the knocking sounded again from outside. Hello, we are here to distribute food packages. Please open the door. A figure in a white uniform stood outside. As my mom began to open the door, I looked at her gravely and shook my head. There had been 4 knocks. Our staff will knock 3 times. If you hear a 4th knock, do not open the door. Mom, we can't open the door. The pattern was wrong. There were 4 knocks. I murmured urgently, "Please open the door to collect your food package." The voice outside insisted, growing more irritable by the second. But I was adamant about keeping the door shut. "Open the door. Open it. Open it. Open it." His tone became increasingly shrill. Suddenly, the mute in the homeowner's chat was disabled. 3 to 304 resident. "What's up with your employee?" He just stared at me smiling when I opened the door and didn't hand over the food package. 3 to 304 resident. "Wait. Hell. What's in this food package?" The message was abruptly cut off by a scream. 3 to 504 resident. "Hey, are you alright? What happened?" 4 to 104 resident. "This is scary. Please say something." 3 to 304 resident. "Sorry everyone. I freaked out over a bug. It's fine now." Hearing this recording, a wave of unease washed over me. The tone of the last message was unnaturally stiff, as if being spoken by someone no longer alive. Filled with terror, I hurried to the balcony. From my position, I could clearly see into apartment 304 across the way. I observed the man from apartment 304 standing in the living room, head drooping. Beside his feet rested a white plastic bag, apparently a food package. My eyes widened, frozen on his next move. With stiff movements, he reached into the bag and fitted something over his head. Pause. As I recognized what it was, my legs nearly failed me, almost sending me to the floor. What the man had pulled out from the bag was his own head. In an instant, sensing something, he whipped around, his gaze piercing in my direction. He rushed to the balcony door, pressing his face against the glass, his features gruesomely twisted. His dark, narrow pupils relentlessly focused on me. "You discovered it." I retreated into the house, my skin prickling with fear. Seeing how ashen I was, my mother hurriedly asked what had happened. I took a deep breath, shook my head, and approached the door. Through the peephole, there was no longer any sign of the man. A solitary food package sat forlornly on the ground. After a cautious 10-minute wait ensuring all was still, I slightly opened the door. A cold, damp draft greeted me, slipping through the gap. The hallway light fizzled with electric noise. A stream of dark red blood marked the floor. I hastily pulled the food package inside. Just as I began to shut the door, a gaunt hand reached in abruptly. Startled, I recognized Brother Wong. He gasped for air, eyes wide with fear, his hand shaking as he grasped mine. "Xiaotong, why does my head feel so light? Like something's terribly wrong? I'm in severe pain, and the medicine isn't working." A deep chill enveloped me, particularly where Brother Wong's hand touched me. His head was horrifically mangled, half devoured, with a gaping hole in his abdomen. "My head hurts unbearably." As Brother Wong reached to feel his head, his fingers met only a slick surface. He paused, a raspy whisper escaping his lips. I recall now, my wife gave me something odd. She said it was cold medicine, but it was no medicine, it was human. A human head. But how did I not see it at the time? I assumed it was just cold medicine and took it. Then my wife complained she was hungry. I cooked her some noodles, but she kept saying she was still hungry, staring at me intently. My mom was so terrified by Brother Wong's state that her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the ground. My throat was tight, rendering me speechless when I tried to speak. "I'm hungry, old Wong." Sister Wong's raspy voice drifted over from next door. Brother Wong shook visibly, glanced at me one last time, let go of my hand, and walked back to his apartment, disappearing from my view. In my palm lay a note stained with blood. I closed the door and unfolded the paper. It read, "Do you remember? You've been through this before. I remember. You told me to remind you to check the diary in the room if I ever remembered. And to be cautious." The rest of the note was smeared with blood, rendering it unreadable. Confused, I clenched the note in my fist. What did the note mean? Had I really experienced this before? And what about the diary in the room? What was that about? I've never been in the habit of keeping a diary. What had Brother Wong suddenly remembered? My mind was suddenly swirling with unanswered questions. My mom abruptly interrupted my train of thought. Xiaotong, what happened to old Wong? His condition. It's not possible for him to still be alive, she said, nearly collapsing. Mom, it's likely we're not in the real world right now, so anything can happen, I replied solemnly. Ignoring the rules could have grave consequences. Having been a nurse familiar with life and death, my mom quickly regained her composure. We opened the food package. It contained 2 bags of vegetables, 2 bags of meat marked as beef, and 1 bag of unmarked, unidentified meat. Staff will distribute food packages. If you encounter unidentified meat, do not consume it. This piece of meat had a peculiarly enticing scent. This meat smells so good. It must be delicious, my mom remarked, her gaze lingering unervingly on the meat in my hand. Alarmed by her stare, I quickly threw the meat into the trash bin. Manager Li soon updated the community group with new guidelines. Nighttime guidelines, they hide in the darkness. Please ensure to package and place all trash outside your door by 10 p.m. Our staff will collect it. If your neighbor begins acting oddly and looks like they might attack, immediately put on a mask. Disinfect before bedtime. Alcohol should be clear. If you see it turn red, discontinue its use at once. Do not converse with any staff member wearing a red uniform, no matter how persistent they are. Ensure your windows are shut and your curtains are open before going to bed. Always keep them open. Keep your room tidy. It favors clutter and dirt. There should be no one in your wardrobe, and you should hear no coughing from it. If you do, hide under your bed immediately. Do not fall asleep under the bed. Do not fall asleep under the bed. There are no eyes beneath the bed. Should you hear dripping from the bathroom in the middle of the night, leave the room immediately. When using the bathroom at night, do not turn on the light. 3 to 305 resident. I need to ask, does anyone else have a bag of good-smelling but unidentified meat in their food package? The guidelines prohibit eating unknown meats, but my mother-in-law is ill and is insisting that I cook this meat. 3 to 305 resident. I couldn't refuse her, so I agreed. That should be okay, right? Upon reading this, a heavy feeling washed over me. Resident 305 had breached the guidelines. While some in the group counseled against cooking the meat for her mother-in-law, others appeared to dismiss the seriousness of the situation. 3 to 305 resident. I fed her, but now she's acting bizarrely. No, what she ate wasn't meat. It was... Someone save me. An unnerving sound of chewing then filled the air. Shocked, I nearly dropped my phone. 3 to 306 resident. Something wrong with 305? There's been continuous screaming next door. Wait, both 305 and 304 suddenly came to my door, asking to come in. They looked all right. 305 claimed they had just taken a fall, but something didn't seem right. I realized what's off about them. I now understand why we should never let our neighbors in. Their heads are twisted backwards. Xiao Jie, don't open the door. Then, I heard the sound of a door creaking open in the voice message. Then, abruptly, the shrill screams cut off. Messages in the chat group rapidly hit the maximum, overflowing at 99+. Everyone was deeply concerned about what had transpired in apartment 306. Yet, I knew there would be no reply from 306. I dashed to the balcony and gazed towards apartment 306. The lights in its living room flickered intermittently. Breath-bated, I watched. When the lights flashed again, the living room was clear to see. Stood there were several ghostly pale figures. The homeowners from 304 and 305, along with the family from 306. They stood rigidly, eerily waving at me. My scalp prickled with alarm. I knew they had crossed over to the other side. A bone-chilling sensation crept up from my feet, enveloping me completely. The time on my phone read 9:50 p.m. I had neatly packed the trash and placed it at the door. Please ensure your trash is bagged and at the door before 10 p.m. Our staff will remove it. My eyes swept over Brother Wong's window, pitch black, revealing nothing. As I looked away, a strange sound arrested my attention. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded from Brother Wang's window. Sister Wang had somehow materialized at the window edge. In her hands was Brother Wang's severed head. Sister Wang, her eyes horrifically wide, gripped Brother Wang's head, repeatedly smashing it against the glass. Thump, thump, thump. I stood petrified. Sister Wang, with jerky movements, opened the window. Xiaotong, why haven't you replenished my cold medicine? I've run out again and I'm still sick. I'll come to your place. Sister Wang began to clamber out of the window. Damn, what could I do? Frozen by terror, I couldn't move. Then, suddenly, a guideline surged in my mind. If your neighbor behaves erratically and seems poised to attack you, immediately put on a mask. Yes, the mask. Sister Wang had already pulled herself fully through the window. She gazed at me with voracious eyes. Shaking, I groped for my mask. By then, Sister Wang was barely inches away. Her actions suddenly froze, and she shot me a look of deep venom. Unwillingly, she withdrew back through the window and vanished from my sight. Sigh, my back slick with cold sweat, I somehow managed to close the door. I recounted the ordeal to my mom. Her face turned ghostly white, and trembling, she asked, "So, the Wangs, both of them, are they dead?" I nodded with gravity. My mother's hand, lying on the sofa, twitched as she whispered, "How can this be? Yang was perfectly fine just before." Silence fell. I was at a loss for words myself. Then suddenly ring, ring, ring. A piercing ring shattered the silence. The landline in the living room jolted to life. Tension gripped me. Do not answer calls on the living room phone. However, as if under a spell, my mother walked directly towards it. I attempted to restrain her, but with a surprising burst of strength, she shrugged me off. Driven by urgency, I yanked the phone line from the wall. Shockingly, the phone still emitted that piercing ring. In a frantic moment, as my mother reached for it, I seized the phone and smashed it to the ground. The ringing ceased instantly. My mother paused, as if awakening from a trance, puzzled. What was I just doing? Relief washed over me. The immediate danger had passed. I was about to retreat to my room when I noticed something unimaginable. A new door, right next to my room. It was an old, dark red door, emanating an eerie presence. A chill ran through me. Our house had always had just 2 rooms. When had this extra room appeared? Mom! My voice quivered with dread. The door creaked open slowly, releasing a screeching sound that made my teeth clench. A thin, pallid hand emerged, grasping the doorframe. A moment later, a face that seemed both known and alien cautiously appeared. My heart beat a fierce rhythm as I exclaimed, "Dad!" My father had perished in a car accident 3 years earlier. He drove a taxi, and during a routine journey on the highway, a truck ahead collided, sending its cargo of steel rods crashing down, one piercing my father's skull. The horror of discovering his mutilated body with my mother is etched into my memory. And now, impossibly, he stood before me again. "Xiaotong, Dad's been a bit out of it, just waking up from a very long nap," he said, his smile unsettling as he stepped out from behind the door. I recoiled, my eyes wide with shock. Yet, my mother acted as though all was normal. "Are you hungry? Let me fix you some late-night snacks." A critical rule surged in my mind. Consistently verify the number of family members. Remain vigilant. And if anything seems amiss, shout prosperity, democracy, civility, harmony, and leap out of the nearest window. My father opened his mouth, stuffed with black incense ashes, completing the surreal tableau. That was the incense we had burned for him earlier. "I'm slightly hungry, but don't bother with any late-night snacks. I've grown weary of the usual fare. I'm in the mood for something fresh." My father's deep, black eye sockets bore into me, his face a pale mask contorted into a grim smile. That was certainly not my father. The foul stench of decay emanated from him, unmistakable and pungent. A frigid wave of dread swept over me. Something fresh? Well, we have just the thing right here. In that instant, my mother's head snapped towards me, her eyes locked onto mine. Panic surged to a peak. How had things come to this? Why was my mother also acting out of character? What rule had I inadvertently violated? A forgotten detail suddenly struck me, chilling me to the bone. It was the time. Our wall clock had malfunctioned a few days prior, running 10 minutes ahead. This meant that when I had stepped outside to dispose of the trash, it was already past 10 o'clock. I had violated the crucial rule of placing the trash outside before 10. Damn. My heightened state of anxiety had caused me to overlook this essential fact. Both my father and mother turned to face me, their eyes filled with unabashed hostility. A palpable sense of crisis gripped me. I knew I had to leap from my room's window. Dad stood ominously at the entrance to my room. Xiaotong, do you know what truly pained Dad? It wasn't the sadness you showed at my accident, but the fear. As he spoke, his head disturbingly began to cave in. A gaping hole, as large as a hand, appeared on his forehead, leaking a sickening mixture of red and white fluids. My lips trembled uncontrollably, tears streaming down my face. That wasn't true. I had never been afraid of my father except now, because I clearly understood that no matter what he claimed, that creature was not my dad. My real dad, even if I appeared frightened, would always comfort me, reassuring me with a gentle pat on my head. My eyes hardened, and I cried out, prosperity, democracy, civility, harmony. Confusion briefly marred my parents' faces. I seized this moment of hesitation, sprinting past them towards the window of my room. Our apartment was on the 8th floor. As I flung open the window, a chill of fear enveloped me. Below was the stark concrete, dotted with figures. Several workers in red uniforms stood there, looking up at me with grinning faces. Do not converse with any individuals wearing red uniforms, despite their attempts to engage you. Could this imply that those in red uniforms are untrustworthy? As I stepped onto the windowsill, the laughter from below became grotesquely exaggerated. What if I were to jump? A heavy feeling settled over me. Should I jump or not? In that moment, my parents regained their composure. My father seized my arm with force. Xiaotong, would you really leave your dad here alone? His expression was terrifyingly distorted. My heart pounded ferociously. His grip was powerful, pulling me back towards the room. With a resolve born of desperation, I broke free, shut my eyes, and screamed, prosperity, democracy, civility, harmony. Then I jumped. The icy wind lashed against my face, stinging sharply. My heart hammered in my chest. Yet, eventually, I landed on something unexpectedly soft. I awoke to find myself on my bed. My mother was beside me, her tears evident. I cried out, startling her as I sat up. She quickly recovered, her hands reaching for my face with relief. Xiaotong, are you awake? You frightened me terribly. You had just stepped outside to dispose of the trash and suddenly fell unconscious. I couldn't rouse you by any means. Later, a man dressed in red appeared. He offered to help revive you, continually asking if I needed his assistance, but I remembered the rule against speaking to those in red attire and remained silent. He grew increasingly menacing as I remained silent. His eyes bulged alarmingly, nearly popping out, as he incessantly claimed that without his intervention, you would remain unconscious forever. I nearly engaged him in conversation, but I held back, and eventually, he departed with the garbage. I exhaled in relief. Thank goodness you didn't speak with him, or I might never have awakened. I silently vowed that once this bizarre episode was resolved, I would immerse myself in studying socialist values more thoroughly. Before bedtime, I planned to disinfect the room using alcohol. However, I noticed that the previously clear alcohol in the bottle on my desk had turned a deep crimson. Before sleeping, ensure to disinfect. Alcohol should be clear, and if it turns red, immediately cease usage. The alcohol was clearly compromised. I double-checked the windows. They were closed. The curtains were drawn open. I pride myself on maintaining a clean environment, and my room was impeccably tidy. All seemed well. However, the one unresolved matter that nagged at me was the diary mentioned in Brother Wang's note. From the note, it appeared I had once discussed something significant with Brother Wang, but I could recall none of it. It seemed the only path to answers lay in locating that diary. After an extensive search, I finally discovered a notebook hidden in a corner beneath my bed. I eagerly flipped it open, only for my pupils to suddenly contract in shock. The initial 3 entries in the diary were written in handwriting indistinguishable from my own. If you are reading this diary, it implies someone has already issued you a warning. Otherwise, you would disregard this diary even if it lay directly before you, such as its ensnaring influence. Ending this nightmare requires eliminating the source of the infection. August 7th, my illness has progressively worsened. I am plagued by auditory hallucinations, constantly hearing a bizarre voice. The pandemic has escalated alarmingly since the lifting of the lockdown. Mom is working tirelessly. To pay for my medical expenses, she juggles 3 jobs daily. I am mostly unconscious, with my coherent moments dwindling. Everyone is desperately hoarding medications, but we have been unsuccessful. The voice addressed me yet again. August 9th, both Mom and I began to fever. Desperate, Mom implored our neighbors for a single antipyretic pill, insisting she could do without one for herself, but we were universally rebuffed. Though it was disheartening, I empathized with the widespread fear. August 11th, while Mom's fever abated, mine persisted. Fortunately, an empathetic individual online learned of our situation and sent us a box of fever reducers. Overjoyed, Mom went to pick up the delivery, but her spirits plummeted upon returning. The medicine had been stolen. I've been afflicted with a harsh fever, and the auditory hallucinations have worsened. Visions too plague me, with furniture often seeming to bleed into red hues. On August 12th, upon hearing that fever reducers were back in stock, my mother quickly cycled to the pharmacy. While the medicine tempered my fever, she tragically suffered a bone fracture due to a collision. By August 14th, as I hoped for recovery, I endured severe headaches and breathlessness at night, culminating in a loss of consciousness. Awakening in a hospital bed, I was told by doctors that the virus had triggered critical complications, necessitating urgent surgery. Yet, knowing our financial constraints, I was bewildered. My mother, however, comforted me, promising she had found a means to finance the surgery. Curiously, why did the hospital room glow red as well? On August 17th, after a mysterious 3-day absence, my mother returned, flush with money, and my surgery proceeded successfully, albeit she returned looking utterly drained. Those 3 days remain a mystery, as does the origin of the substantial sum she acquired. On August 18th, I sensed an unsettling shift in my mother. Her mind seemed elsewhere, yet occasionally her stare would pierce me. That night, the unmistakable sound of meat being chopped echoed from the kitchen. I cautiously peeked outside, only to be met with a scene of sheer horror. My mother was severing her own flesh. Indeed, you read that correctly. She was systematically slicing her own flesh. Am I descending into madness? Is my condition deteriorating? On August 19th, I spent a restless night, oblivious to how I returned to my room. My mother appeared unscathed, her body bearing no marks of injury, yet my memory vividly captures her methodically chopping herself into pieces and stuffing the remnants into bags. I am certain I was not mistaken. Last night's vision was no illusion. With a disturbing smile, my mother pulled several packets of meat from our refrigerator, claiming she would distribute them to our neighbors. Yet, I knew without a doubt it was her own flesh. I felt compelled to warn our community, but it was already too late. Mr. Lee, our property manager, was the first to partake, with more neighbors following suit. By August 23rd, the world outside had spiraled into chaos and peril. I've remained barricaded in my room, convinced that the entity outside is not my mother. I am unsure of its true nature, but it is undeniably the epicenter of this infection. Hell, It's breaking in now. Save me, save me, save me. The diary ends abruptly, leaving a chilling silence. The handwriting at the end of the diary was tumultuous and hastily scribbled. Baffled, I snapped the diary shut. The first few sentences clearly bore my handwriting. However, the script that followed was alien to mine. This implied that the latter entries were not my work. Yet, the presence of personal reminders within suggested I had once been familiar with this diary. I revisited the note. Brother Wong's message declared this wasn't my first encounter with these events. But my mind held no trace of any such memories. The final words on the note, blurred by bloodstains, urged caution. Could it be a warning to be cautious of Mom? Profound unease overwhelmed me. My head pounded with pain. There's a vital memory, it seems, that I've somehow overlooked. I can't pinpoint when, but I drifted off to sleep. I was roused not by noise, but by an unsettling chill. The darkness in the room felt wrong, too profound. Somehow, the curtains that had been open were now sealed shut. Not a sliver of light peeked through. Before sleep, ensure the windows are shut and the curtains wide open. They must be open. My gaze locked on the curtains. I sprung from my bed, eager to pull them apart. But my steps froze almost instantly, for there, behind the curtains, was the distinct bulge of a human figure. Someone was lurking just behind them. There I was, huddled motionlessly, coiled in a tight ball. My fists clenched tightly. I suppressed my breath and edged toward the curtain. With a swift, determined pull, I tore the curtain open. There was no one there. Instead, a solitary red dress lay sprawled on the floor. The diary had hinted at its preference for red. Its meaning remained unclear, yet unmistakably it had been here. The window remained firmly shut. Nonetheless, an inexplicable draft chilled the room. Surveying the area, I detected a narrow opening in the wardrobe. Inside, darkness veiled all but a few vague outlines of clothing. This struck me as peculiar. Cough, 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 cough. Abruptly, a series of harsh coughs bellowed from within the wardrobe. If there's no one in the wardrobe, coughing shouldn't occur. If you hear it, hide under the bed immediately. Instantly, I scrambled under the bed, stilling my breath and listening intently to the external sounds. It was bitterly cold under the bed. Clad in just my pajamas, my limbs turned icy. Creak. From the wardrobe came a slight creak. Something was indeed opening its door. Cold sweat dotted my forehead. Something was emerging from within the wardrobe. My entire body tensed and curled tighter. The sound of its movements was unusual, a series of thuds, reminiscent of a racket striking the ground. Pause. How was it moving? I peered from beneath the bed with widened eyes. And then, two alarmingly wide eyes met mine. Upside down, my mother's face hovered before me, her lips slowly curving into a sinister smile. I was frozen in fear. The ominous thudding I had been hearing was her, walking inverted, her head down. During home confinement, it's crucial to monitor the mental well-being of your relatives. Should anyone start to walk upside down or laugh uncontrollably, immediately contact our staff at 88XXXXXX. Trembling, I fumbled for my phone and dialed the number. Quickly, a familiar voice of a young woman came on the line. With urgency, she exclaimed, "Gu Tong, the only thing you should do now is close your eyes, and no matter what sounds you hear, keep them shut." Without hesitation, I clamped my eyes shut. It was a while before I felt someone calling my name with loud urgency. "Xiao Tong, wake up! You can't fall asleep under the bed." The voice was unmistakably my mother's, tinged with a nearness to tears. Had I fallen asleep under the bed? When had I slipped into slumber? Could it be that I had inadvertently fallen asleep, contrary to the rules? "Xiao Tong, please, I'm begging you, open your eyes." My mother's voice broke into desperate sobs. I was on the verge of opening my eyes when the words of the woman on the phone echoed in my mind. No matter what you hear, never open your eyes. Do not open your eyes. But what if I actually do fall asleep now? The sound of my mother's cries intensified, echoing louder and louder, twisting my head into a throb of distress, until her tone shifted, growing increasingly piercing. I kept my eyes closed the whole time, not daring to look. Time passed unmarked, until at last, the cries ceased. A dead silence enveloped the space around me. Half an hour later, when I was certain all was quiet, I finally opened my eyes. My mother had disappeared. The wardrobe door was shut. I crawled out from under the bed and resettled myself atop it. Yet, my thoughts lingered on the woman from the phone call. Her voice was not just familiar, it carried an inexplicable warmth. I was sure I had heard it before, definitely more than once. This employee could call me by name. Who was she? I mulled over this until sleep took me unawares. Upon waking, daylight bathed the room. The sunlight was sharply intense on my face. A repeating message from the community's loudspeakers echoed. All residents are requested to collect cold medicine at the property management office. I climbed out of bed and washed up quickly in the bathroom. The reflection that greeted me seemed prematurely aged. It was strange. I should be a high school student, but I looked to be in my mid-20s. I tapped my forehead, perplexed, and left the room. In the kitchen, my mother was stirring a pot of porridge. She smiled as she saw me, saying, "I made beef porridge with the beef from yesterday's food pack. It's nearly done." I nodded, and my eyes inadvertently caught sight of an empty packet in the trash can, bereft of any label. I froze. I had discarded this label-less packet last night. Unless, in the time I had collapsed by the door, my mother had retrieved that packet of meat. My gaze fixed on her back as my heart began to pound. A curious aroma drifted from the pot. A wave of intense hunger washed over me. My mother carefully brought over 2 steaming bowls of porridge. Red chunks of meat floated atop the porridge. "Mom, is this made with beef?" I asked, my gaze fixed on her eyes. She smiled back. "Yes, what else could it be but beef?" Before I could react, she started devouring the porridge with an eagerness that belied the heat. It was then that the diary's entry flashed through my mind. The mother in the diary had sliced off her own flesh to feed to the neighbors. Could this unlabeled meat be? My appetite vanished. 2 possibilities sprang to mind. First, that my mother, unable to curb her craving, had retrieved the discarded meat. Second, that she had done so intentionally. "Why aren't you eating?" she asked, looking up at me. Her lips ringed with fragments of meat. A surge of nausea overtook me. "I'm not hungry. I'm going to get some cold medicine," I managed to say. I left in a rush. As I departed, my mother's penetrating gaze followed me. Masked, I walked among the community dwellers. Some, like me, wore white N95 masks. Others donned red ones. Staff-issued N95 masks are white. Immediately discard any red masks. Those in red masks seemed unchanged from the rest. I ran into a few familiar faces who greeted me. I made my way to the property management office. A lengthy queue had formed, crowded with people. The man in front of me was the resident of apartment 304 from the building across the street. The memory of what I had seen on the balcony yesterday caused me to instinctively step back. The man turned his head. He too was wearing a red mask. He flashed a brief smile at me, then turned back around, dismissing me. I exhaled in relief. After about 10 minutes, my turn came. The property employee, without looking up initially, handed me a box of cold medicine. When he finally raised his head, I froze. It was Brother Wong. Dressed in a property management uniform and cap, he looked the part perfectly. Yet I was sure I had seen him dead the previous night. Brother Wong. Brother Wong gave me a warm smile. "Young lady, just call me Old Wong. That's what everyone calls me." "Weren't you? When did you start working with property management?" Brother Wong appeared genuinely surprised by my question. "Young lady, I've been here for 7 or 8 years. What about the note you gave me last night?" "What note?" Brother Wong looked genuinely confused. I felt a sinking feeling. "It's nothing. I got home with the cold medicine. Upon inspection, there were 4 white pills and 4 red ones. Issued cold medicine is white. If you find red pills, flush them immediately. I immediately disposed of the red pills down the toilet. My temperature was 37.5 degrees Celsius. Today was the 4th day of my fever. It was almost over. Mom, could you check your temperature too? My mom was in the bathroom but didn't answer. Feeling uneasy, I rushed into the bathroom. She was bent over the toilet, desperately fishing inside until she retrieved a red pill. I couldn't stop her in time and watched as she put it in her mouth. My mind broke. I knew then that she was infected. I retreated to my room, locked the door, and collapsed, panting on the floor. Soft knocks began on the door, escalating quickly. Bang, bang, bang. 4 knocks in total. Xiao Tong, open the door. Her voice began normally but quickly sharpened unnaturally. Open the door. Open the door. Open the door. I clutched my ears. My head throbbed with each knock. The door was on the verge of breaking down. It wouldn't hold much longer. Only by killing the source of the infection can this nightmare end. August 17th, Mom came back 3 days after she vanished with a lot of money. My surgery was successful, but she looked terribly worn out. I have no idea what she did in those 3 days or how she managed to scrape together such a large sum. The words from the diary resurfaced in my mind. Could it be? Is Mom the source of the infection? But the person who wrote the diary couldn't possibly be me. Bang! A loud crash, and a large hole appeared in the door. Mom's face appeared through it. She was smiling grotesquely, her eyes locked on me. It's time for your medicine, the red cold medicine. I backed away, my skin cold with sweat. That's right, the staff's phone number. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and dialed the number. The call connected instantly. Gu Tong, it's crunch time. Whether this horror ends is all on you. Remember, for God's sake, remember. The call cut off sharply. A violent pain seared through my brain. Suddenly, with a jolt, I looked up at Mom, who was now halfway through the door. Memories that had been tampered with by some unseen force suddenly clarified in my mind. I am unmistakably without a mother. I'm not a high school student. Instead, I am a 25-year-old adult. Motherless, my only family is my father. This place is surely not the real world. Nor do I belong to this world. More precisely, I am known as a challenger. In 2026, as the pandemic waned, a calamity far surpassing the coronavirus plagued all of humankind. It began when a mysterious meteorite plummeted to Earth. However, by the following day, the meteorite had vanished in a baffling manner. It introduced a form of profoundly terrifying dark matter that spread at breakneck speed across the globe. This eerie resurgence of dark matter summoned haunting tales across the planet. The world was fragmented into innumerable haunting narratives. Each nation selected individuals who were deemed fit to delve into these narratives and enter the world of tales. These individuals are termed challengers. Brother Wang, or rather his true name Wang De, both he and I are challengers. Together, we ventured into a tale world dubbed Happy Community. The level of challenge in this world of haunting tales is immense and shows signs of escalating. Should the Happy Community narratives reach extent, an ever greater number of ordinary people will find themselves ensnared by this tale. A hazardous narrative has the potential to precipitate the collapse of an entire nation. The once celebrated cherry blossom country has vanished, a casualty of its failure to quell a realm of supernatural tales. After Wang De and I entered the haunted narrative of Happy Community, my identity shifted to that of Gu Tong, a high school girl, while Wang De transformed into Gu Tong's neighbor, Old Wang. This is the essence of supernatural tales horror. It assigns every participant a logical identity. However, the true terror of these tales isn't just the roles they impose. Their most frightening feature is their ability to erase your real-world memories. Wang De and I endured 5 days within this haunted world. On the 5th day, when we believed we could pinpoint and destroy the infection source, we committed a grave error. This error condemned Wang De to an eternal existence within this realm, and it nearly cost me my life, depleting half of my vitality. The problem was that the source we destroyed wasn't the genuine origin of the infection. When I first entered this world, I killed Mom, but the tale persisted. The real source of the infection isn't the mom of this supernatural world. Now, Mom had completely entered the room. Her face was marked by a disturbing smile, rigid but inexorably advancing toward me. I bit down hard. If Mom isn't the real source of infection, what is? The real genesis of this nightmarish world. August 7th, my condition deteriorated significantly. I began to hear hallucinations, a strange voice speaking to me persistently. The pandemic intensified around the same time. The fever became unbearable, and the auditory hallucinations intensified. I also began seeing visual distortions, notably furniture turning red. Suddenly, the diary entries raced through my mind like turning pages. I shuddered with realization. The true source of infection. It was me. From the auditory hallucinations to seeing red furniture, it was evident that I was infected. After it infected me, I subsequently infected my mother. My mother then infected the entire community. This is how the eerie tale of Happy Community came to be. At that moment, my mother approached me. I bolted towards the bathroom, where an eyebrow trimmer lay. It was enough for me to end my life. My mother, sensing my intentions, grabbed my arm tightly. Her grip was incredibly strong, nearly tearing my arm apart. Pain exploded through my arm. With gritted teeth, I forced myself towards the bathroom. Suddenly, a stabbing pain shot through my shoulder. I let out a scream of agony. My left arm was brutally torn off by my mother. The intense pain made everything go dark, and I crumpled to the ground. I almost blacked out. Laughter from my mother followed. A haunting sound that was both male and female. Felt like needles stabbing into my brain. The pain forced me to crawl. Now I had no allies left. Wangda had completely become a part of this community. I was on my own now. If I couldn't find a way to kill myself, I would be doomed to stay here forever, becoming part of this ghastly tale, increasing its power. I bit down hard on my teeth. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. I was almost at the bathroom. Then, suddenly, a tearing force came from my left leg. Aya! I screamed in torturous pain. My left leg was broken too. But thankfully, I made it into the bathroom. With my last ounce of strength, I grabbed an eyebrow trimmer, turned around, and with my remaining right-hand fingers, I gave my mother the middle finger. D. I spat out viciously, my face deathly pale. The next second, I slit my own throat. Darkness enveloped my vision. When I awoke again, I was in a hospital. Gutong, you're awake. A beautiful woman greeted, seated beside my bed. I sat up and flexed my limbs. The only benefit of the eerie tale world is that as long as you don't die, all injuries sustained inside it heal once you return to reality. Captain Lin, how did you manage to contact me with a phone? I asked, driven by curiosity. A brief smile touched Captain Lin's face, then disappeared. We've sacrificed many team members to the eerie tale of Happy Community. We've grown familiar with this world's traits, and I used some special tools to reach you. Yet, you truly didn't disappoint. 6 months ago, you almost perished in this world. Now, the eerie tale of Happy Community is no more. Gutong, on behalf of Huagua, I genuinely thank you for saving our country from a crisis. I hopped off the bed and struck up a cigarette. What's next? The eerie tale of Mom's note or the Dynasty Hotel regulations? While one tale has been resolved, many unresolved eerie tales still lie ahead. But I hold on to the belief that, one day, the world will return to how it was before the eerie tales began.